Hi, Michael Force here again. Welcome to BASE. We are on lesson number 5 now. Lesson number 5 is going to teach you how to launch your digital business loud so that really they come running from everywhere. There is a lot of strategies behind this on getting the word out, whether it be on social, whether it be in search, whether it be your own lists, whether it be using JV partners or joint ventures, all of that kind of stuff to make sure that you really get the word out really, really big when you're initially launching your business. You can even do, business associates, people that you know, so on and so forth. There's a lot of different little strategies behind that, and I'm going to break those all down here for you in this lesson number 5 here. So let's jump into it, and I'll see you on the inside. Hello, welcome to lesson number 5. This is Michael Force here with the BASE Digital Business Mastery course here. We're going to talk about learning to launch your digital business loud so they come running here. Let's jump into this lesson. You only get to launch once. It won't happen again. That's why it's so important for you to take time during this lesson. Let's talk about what we've completed so far. We've walked you through how to cast your vision and understand your dream. We've discussed the nitty-gritty of business planning, legal and finance. I shared the secrets of developing a strong brand and how to wireframe an effective website. Now you're ready to launch your business to the world. This lesson's not about launch day. This lesson is about preparing for that day. I see too many entrepreneurs spend all of their time and money on their product or service, and when it comes to launch day, they are hurried and broke. I like to start with this. An effective product launch should be a minimum of 6 days. For some, it may be as long as 6 months. Today's lesson is broken down into 2 sections. The first is the logistical and tactical preparing, developing and executing of your launch. The second is about how to think or strategize the communication behind the launch. As the great Abraham Lincoln once said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first 5 sharpening the axe." Here are 3 stages of a successful launch. Stage 1 is intricate planning. Now, I've done a number of launches over the years, and I can tell you that none of this would have worked without intricate planning. So let's start with 10 critical questions you must ask yourself before launch. I'm not going to go diving into too much detail, but like I said, to consider your answers during your planning stage. Number 1, is your product actually ready to launch? Does your product actually do what it's meant to do? The last thing you want is 200 people to buy your product and it doesn't meet the expectations of your customers. Number 2, do you have a well-equipped team in place? Evaluate your support mechanisms behind the product. Ask, do I have the marketing materials, the packaging, and back systems in order? Have I developed a plan for gathering the metrics and feedback? If you answered no to any of these questions, it's okay and you could delay your launch. Also, avoid publicly tying yourself to a specific date unless you're certain you can actually hit it. Number 3, do you really understand who your customer is? Similar to the cell phone story, you may have thought that it was the tune of $600,000, asked some strangers about the product, maybe even paid for some low market research from your local college or university. Remember, we don't know what we don't know, and launching to the wrong customer can kill your business. Number 4, do you have the right price point? More often than not, new entrepreneurs underprice their products as a reaction to their low self-confidence. But on the market, people associate a cheap price with a cheap product. An oversight on pricing, whether it's too low or too high, can hurt your launch efforts. Number 5, can you run a pre-order campaign? With the growth of crowdfunding campaigns like Kickstarter, going with a pre-order strategy can dramatically lower the risk of your launch. If so, what are you going to be your incentives? Do you have the money to produce a professional video, a 5-star product photography, and a physical prototype? Number 6, is it the right timing? For example, are you launching a school product in the middle of summer or a mom product 1 month before Mother's Day? Look for strategic timing, as it'll make a huge difference in your ability to gain press from the media. Secondly, you may feel a sense of urgency to introduce your product, but rushing could spell disaster. When necessary, temporarily postponing your launch can mean the difference between failure and glowing reviews. Number 7, how are people going to hear about your launch? Are you going to get PR, support from online influencers, build a social media strategy, or buy advertising? Do you have a dog product? What dog blogs, magazines, pet events, influential pet trainers, and local stores will be promoting your product on launch week? How many people do you want to reach? We're going to be talking a lot more about marketing strategy in the next section. What's the launch goal? Have you developed an execution timeline? Don't fool yourself into writing or believing a launch can happen without a written plan with concrete ideas, deadlines, tasks, who's responsible, the expected results, and a backup plan in case plan A doesn't work. Number 10, this is less of a question and more of a demand. Plan a launch party. With all this hard work, a launch party will not only support your strategy, but become a great way to celebrate everything you've done so far. Here's your first task. Answer the 10 planning questions in this module study guide and put together your short 2 to 5 page execution timeline. Stage 2, developing. Developing the items and strategy within your execution timeline takes effort. One piece of advice I encourage you to lean on is differentiation. We've talked about this in detail in Module 3. People only notice what's different. What can you do with every element of your launch timeline to make your product appear different than everyone else's? Remember, this is how people see products today. Last year, 42,000 major products launched. That's 115 per day. The question is, can you even name one of them? American families on average repeatedly buy the same 150 items, which constitute as much as 85% of their household needs. We have to remember, it's hard to get something new on the radar, so hitting every point in your timeline with a radical differentiation is critical. Ultimately, I expect you to be so good, people can't ignore you. It's your product, website, app, book, packaging, business cards, everything so well done that complete strangers who hear about you doing your launch week will tell their friends about your product. What will they be willing to associate their name with your brand? Stage 3, launching. With all the work that's building up to launch day, it can become intimidating to actually press go. Your OCD people can find themselves pushing back the launch until you get every single element perfect. But there's a problem with this. Even the great Steve Jobs says, if you're not slightly embarrassed about your product on launch day, you've waited too long to get it out there. Remember, launching is only the beginning. And while your product launches feels like the Super Bowl, it really is the start of this season for the entrepreneur. The bigger question is, are you ready to be successful? Remember, here at DA, we prepare you for success, not failure. I expect each of you to have a plan with precise detail so that when people begin buying your products, you're not out of stock or understaffed. Far too often I hear new entrepreneurs say, well, that's a good problem to have. Sure, but my response is always this: it's still a problem. Launch week should be a culmination of all of your planning, similar to the grand finale at a fireworks show. If you have a job, you may want to consider taking a few days off. Your site should solely on building hype, spending ad dollars effectively, reminding influencers who've committed a promotion, and rallying your team. Remember, launch day isn't just about sales. It's about building excitement, because not everyone will be able to buy that week. But if they can hear about it, that's a win too. Hear me when I say this. Launching a new product can be scary. Actually, it's always scary to share your brand creation with the world. What if people don't like it? What if nobody buys it? There is, however, a few simple marketing strategies to make sure none of these fears come true. I want you to make another important point. I don't want you to be overwhelmed. I want you to be prepared. The reason most launches fail is because they haven't learned the lessons I'm teaching you here at DA. Be confident in this. If you follow this model and you plan well, your chances of success are astronomically higher. As an online business owner and a student of successful product launches myself, I have identified 7 keys of launching just about anything. A book, a business, or even a blog. Researchers have been studying the factors that influence us to say yes to the request of others for over 60 years. There can be no doubt that there is a science to how we are persuaded, and a lot of the science is surprising. When making a decision, it would be nice to think that people consider all the available information in order to guide their thinking, but the reality is very often different. In the increasing overloaded lives that we lead, more than ever, we need shortcuts or rules of thumb to guide our decision making. I've identified just 7 of these classic shortcuts as universals that guide human behavior and will help drive sales and brand connection on launch week. They're reciprocity, scarcity, authority, consistency, liking, consensus, and anticipation. Understanding these shortcuts and employing them in a strategic manner can significantly increase the chances that someone picks up your product during that launch week. Let's take a closer look at each in turn. The first universal principle is the influence of reciprocity. Simply put, people are obliged to give back to others in the form of behavior, gift, or service that they've received first. If a friend invites you to a party, there's an obligation for you to invite them to a future party that you are hosting. If a colleague does you a favor, then you owe that colleague a favor. And in the context of a social obligation, people are more likely to say yes to those that they owe. I call this favor bank. In the months leading up to a launch, you may want to make lots of deposits in your favor bank. Maybe you write a blog post for a friend who has a large following on Facebook, or you send a gift to someone you eventually will be asking for an endorsement from. One of the best demonstrations of the principle of reciprocity comes from a series of studies conducted in restaurants. The last time you visit a restaurant, there's a good chance that the waiter or waitress will have given you a gift, probably about the same time that they'll bring you your bill. Maybe a liquor or a fortune cookie, or perhaps a simple mint. Here's the question. Does the giving of a mint have the influence on how much you tip as you're going to leave them? Most people will say no, but that mint can make a surprising difference. If the study, giving diners a single mint at the end of their meal, typically increased tips by about 3%. Interestingly, if the gift is doubled and 2 mints are provided, tips don't double, they quadruple, at 14% increase in tips. Perhaps most interestingly of all, in fact, if the waiter provides the mint, starts to walk away from the table but pauses, turns back and says, "For you nice people, here's an extra mint," the tip goes through the roof. A 23% increase, influenced not by what was given, but by how it was given. I've leveraged this tactic during different launches over the years, and I've added something into shipping. And I've been able to give them, and that has gotten me, tens of thousands of shares on social media. The key to using the principle of reciprocity is to be the first to give and to ensure that you give is personalized of the high quality and expectation. Here's your second task. List off 10 deposits you're going to make in your favor bank before you launch. Secondly, list 2 ways you can give something to potential customers that will likely cause them to reciprocate to support your launch. The second universal principle of persuasion is scarcity. Simply put, people want more of these things than they can have less of. When British Airways announced in 2003 that they would no longer be offering the twice daily London to New York Concorde flight because it had become inefficient to run, sales the very next day took off. Notice that nothing had changed about the Concorde itself. It certainly didn't fly any faster, and the service didn't get any better, and the airfare didn't drop. It had simply become a scarce resource, and as a result, people wanted more of it. When it comes to effectively persuading others, use the scarcity principle. It's not enough to simply tell people about the benefits they'll gain if they choose your products and services. You also need to point out what is unique about your proposition and what they stand to lose if they fail to consider your proposal in time. For example, there are when you launch an online event, you can set 3 different costs. One at $79, $99, and $149. It was clear that if you wanted all the information and content, you'd need to buy the largest package. But what wasn't clear was to limit the $149 package. We only had 150 spaces. So what happened? They sold out first. Secondly, you couldn't just buy tickets, you had to apply. This drove people nuts because it drove applications to the roof. We had over 600 applicants, of which 364 purchased a ticket. That's a 50% conversion rate. Since the event wasn't open to the public, the attendees felt special because they were chosen. Just another benefit of leveraging scarcity in your launch. Here's your third task. List 2 ways you can add scarcity to your product launch. Maybe a gift for the first 100 customers, or you have a limited edition signed version, or a countdown clock for registration. Our third principle of influence is the principle of authority, the idea that people follow the lead of credible, knowledgeable experts. Physical therapists, for example, are able to persuade more of their patients to comply with the recommended exercise programs if they display their medical diplomas on the wall of their consulting rooms. People are more likely to give change for a parking meter to a complete stranger if the requester wears a uniform rather than casual clothes. What the science is telling us is that it's important to signal to others what makes you credible, knowledgeable, authority before you make your influence attempt. Of course, this can present problems. You can hardly go around telling potential customers how brilliant you are, but you can certainly arrange for someone else to do it for you. Surprisingly, the science tells us that it doesn't seem to matter if the person who introduces you is not only connected to you, but is also likely to prosper from the introduction themselves. One group of real estate agents were able to increase both the number of property appraisals and the number of subsequent contracts that they wrote by arranging For the reception staff who answered customer inquiries their mentioned colleagues' credentials and expertise. Customers interested in leasing a new property were told, "Leasing? Let me connect you with Sandra, who has over 15 years of experience leasing properties in the area." Customers who wanted more information about selling properties were told, "Oh, speak to Peter, head of our sales. He has over 20 years of experience selling properties. I'll put you through now." The impact of the expert introduction led to a 20% rise in the number of appointments and 15% rise increase in the number of signed contracts. Not bad for a small change in form of persuasion science, which is both ethical and costless to implement. I use the tactic on DA homepage and blog. You can find endorsements from prominent successful people, affirming potential customers that I could teach them on how to start a business. On the blog, you'll notice that how many people subscribe to my list, or how many people follow me on social profiles, so on and so forth. It's the visibility of authority that helps people feel comfortable and trusting when you buy a product from them. Here's your fourth task. List 3 ways you can show authority during your launch. List a deadline and a next step required to put authority presence into action. The next principle is consistency. People like to be consistent with the things they have previously said or done. Consistency is activated by looking for and asking for initial commitments that can be made. In one of the famous studies, researchers found, rather unsurprisingly, that very few people would be willing to erect an unsightly wooden board on their front lawn to support a Drive Safely campaign in their neighborhood. However, in a similarly neighborhood close by, 4 times as many homeowners indicated that they would be willing to erect this unsightly billboard. Why? Because 10 days previously they had agreed to place a small postcard in the front window of their home to signal their support for Drive Safely campaign. That small card was an initial commitment that led them up a 400% increase in a much bigger, but still consistent change. When seeking to influence using the consistency principle, the detective of influence looks for voluntary, active, and public commitments, and ideally gets these commitments in writing. For example, I'm considering launching a free course called the 7 Days to Startup, where users have to apply and sign a written commitment to launch your dream. I would send them a daily email with a short video and some important questions, and on the last day, I would push them towards enrollment at DA. With this strategy, I primed the buy-in and offered them something consistent with something they're already committed to. Here's your 5th task. To find one free or cheap pre-product commitment you can produce that will naturally lead customers towards your main product or service for launch. The 5th principle is the principle of liking. People prefer to say yes to those they like. What causes one person to like another one? Persuasion science tells us that there is 3 important factors. We like people who are similar to us. We like people who pay us compliments. And we like people who cooperate with us towards mutual goals. As more and more of the interactions that we have are taking place online, it might be worth asking whether these factors can be employed effectively in online negotiations. In a series of negotiation studies carried out between MBA students at 2 well-known business schools, some groups were told time is money. Get straight down to business. This group, around 55%, were able to come to an agreement. A second group, however, were told before you begin negotiating, exchange some personal information with each other. Identify similarities you share in common, and then begin negotiating. In this group, 90% of them were able to come to successful agreeable outcomes that were typically worth 18% more to both parties. To harness this power principle of liking, be sure to look for areas of similarity you share with others and genuine compliments you can give before you get down to business. For your launch, spend time taking personal life and details with those who will be supporting you. This could be endorsements, press opportunities, influencers, bloggers, store owners, your salespeople, or your launch team. The power of your team is so much greater if they like you too. Your next task, list 5 ways you can show people involved in your launch that you like them and that your relationship with them is deeper than this launch. The 6th principle is consensus. Especially when people are uncertain, people will look to the actions and behaviors of others to determine their own. You may have noticed that hotels often place a small card in the bathrooms that attempt to persuade guests to reuse their towels and linens. Most do this by drawing the guest's attention to the benefits that reuse can have on environmental protection. It turns out that this is a pretty effective strategy, leading around 35% compliance. But could there be even a more effective way? It turns out about 75% of people who check into a hotel for 4 nights or longer will reuse their towels at some point during their stay. What would happen if you took a lesson from this principle of consensus and simply included that information on the card that said 75% of our guests reuse their towels at some point during their stay, so please do so as well. It turns out that when a hotel does this, towel reuse rises by 26%. Now imagine the next time you stay in a hotel, you saw one of these signs. You picked it up and you read the following message. 75% of the people who have stayed in this room have reused their hotel towel. What do you think? Like most people, you'd probably guess that this sign has no influence on your behavior whatsoever. But it turns out that changing just a few words on a sign to honestly point out what's comparable previous guests have done was the single most effective message, leading to a 33% increase in reuse. The science is telling us that rather than relying on our own ability to persuade others, we can point to what others are already doing. You'll notice I leveraged consensus in the DA group by asking some of the members what they thought of a certain module and receiving positive responses from many individuals, and are encouraged to keep their membership active. On other online interviews, I may share our total membership numbers by saying we have 300 members chasing, their dreams here at DA right now. For someone reading this or hearing this, it might provide the confidence boost that digital altitude is less risky. Here's your next task. List 2 or 3 ways that you can show that others have done in the past to support your brand, blog, or launch. Maybe it's on the email capture of your blog and it reads, join the 1,233 people who will get the private 3-minute marketing strategy this week. The last principle is anticipation. Why do people stand in line for hours to get the new iPhone when they could just waltz into an Apple store next week or order one without any hassle? They just can't wait. Anticipation creates demand. It's what makes people want what you have before anything else. And you can create anticipation by doing 2 things. Number 1, announcing the launch date and placing a countdown clock on your site. Number 2, providing people clear instruction on what aspiring buyers need to do to get your product. For example, arrive at 6 a.m. or place your order by midnight or use this hashtag to enter. When you tell people to wait, it creates an energy that can be leveraged into action. Now, Blake McCoskey, the founder of Tom's Shoes, did this when he sent padlocked wooden tubes 6 feet tall by 3 feet in diameter to all the Nordstroms. Inside held a brand new Tom's product that nobody had ever seen before. They sat in stores for 2 weeks while managers, employees, and customers read a big sign that said, the next Tom's product will change everything. And it included the reveal date. We all know that it was their sunglass line, where you could buy a pair of Tom's sunglasses and give a pair of reading glasses to a child in a developing country. What a great way to build anticipation. I do this by closing some of the digital altitude registrations by Friday for the weekend. Someone lands on the site on Saturday, I have an email capture in place for the pricing section that says enrollment is currently closed. Now, enter your email and be notified when it's open again. It gives off a vibe that you're so confident in your product that you can dictate when it's available. You're not desperate. Even if someone can afford money for it today, you would still say you have to wait, and that's powerful consumer psychology. Here's your final task. List 5 ways you can create anticipation or hype for your launch. How can people really eagerly get to see what it is that you're about to introduce to the world? There we have it. 7 scientifically validated principles of persuasion to provide small, practical, often costless changes that can lead to big differences in the ability to influence and persuade others in an entirely ethical way. If you can leverage all of these and combine quality product with good branding and an average launch budget, I'll have no doubt that you can be successful. Now this concludes this lesson's video. Let's go over what we've learned. Number 1, the importance a launch has on your long-term success. The 3 stages of an effective launch and how important planning is in the process. The 7 principles of persuasion for launch teams and how integrating all of them will drastically increase your success rate. You have 8 important tasks this month. Number 1, answer the 9 planning questions in the module study guide and finalize your short 2-page execution timeline. Number 2, list off 10 deposits you're going to make in your favor bank before launch. Secondly, list off 2 of these you can provide someone to potential customers that will likely cause them to reciprocate in support for your launch. Number 3, list all 2 ways that you can add scarcity to your product launch. Maybe a gift for the 100 customers. You have a limited edition signed version or a countdown clock for registration. Number 4, list 3 ways that you can show authority during the launch. List the deadline and the next steps required to put the authority presence into action. Number 5, define one free or cheap product commitment you can produce and will naturally lead customers toward your main product or service. Number 6, list 5 ways you can show people involved in your launch that you like them and your relationship with them is deeper than this launch. Number 7, list 2 to 3 ways you can show what others have done in the past to support your brand blog or launch. Number 8, list 5 ways you can create anticipation or for hype for your launch. How you can get people really eager to see what you're about to introduce to the world. Next, finish the lesson. You'll want to read this month's short PDF pack, then complete the study guide and check the list. You shouldn't take longer than 90 minutes. Also pick up a copy of this month's recommended reading, audio and or print, before moving on to the next module. Lastly, the next module is all about social media to leverage the social sphere to build a platform brand and drive sales. Here's a sneak peek into what we're going to be learning. Number 1, the secret setup of engaging social profiles. Number 2, how to manage multiple profiles well. Number 3, how to boost engagement that makes people feel close to you. Number 4, how to set up a healthy content schedule. Thanks for joining me today. I'm praying that your launch goes off just like a rocket ship. And remember the power of community. The Facebook group is waiting for your questions and your feedback. You just need to dive in. I'll leave you with this quote. Good things may come to those who wait, but only what's left for those who hustle. I'll see you in the next session. Michael